A millionaire, hiding in plain sight as a poor man, searching desperately for a mother for his only son, and the humble maid who would change everything. That is the story you are about to hear. I'm John Parker, and today's story will touch your heart. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give your like. It's very important to me. And leave in the comments which city or country you are listening from. Now, let's begin. The town of Ashtonville, Virginia, was small enough that everyone thought they knew one another's secrets, but big enough to conceal the ones that mattered most. On a rainy afternoon, a man in worn boots and a faded plaid shirt walked quietly through Main Street. No one noticed that the man with the heavy eyes and the humble stride was in fact Alexander Whitmore, a millionaire who owned half the factories in the county. Alexander carried with him not the pride of wealth, but the weight of loneliness. Since the tragic death of his wife 3 years earlier, his mansion had become a gilded prison. The money in his accounts, the cars in his garage, the estate that stretched for acres, none of it gave warmth to the life of his 8-year-old son. Ethan was a fragile boy with a shy gaze and a heart that longed for affection. Tutors, governesses, and even relatives had tried to fill the void left by his mother's absence, but the boy would turn away, refusing to call anyone by the sacred name of Mom. Alexander knew his fortune could buy anything, except love. So, in a moment of boldness that would shock those who knew his true stature, Alexander disguised himself as a poor worker. He shaved his neatly trimmed beard into rough stubble, traded his suits for second-hand clothes, and drove an old pickup truck instead of one of his imported cars. He told himself, "If a woman can care for my son without knowing the size of my bank account, then maybe she is the one who truly deserves to be his mother." It was under this disguise that he first entered the modest diner at the edge of town, where the scent of coffee lingered and laughter from weary waitresses filled the air. That is where he saw her. Clara Benson, a young maid working double shifts to survive. Clara's hair was pulled back into a messy bun, her apron stained by the labor of the day, but her eyes carried a strength and tenderness that could not be disguised. Alexander noticed the way Clara knelt beside a crying child at one of the tables, whispering softly until the tears turned into giggles. He noticed the way she helped an elderly man with trembling hands cut his meatloaf, never once showing impatience. And when she thought no one was watching, he saw her sit in the back, pulling out a tiny photo of a boy, her own son, lost years ago in a custody battle that had broken her heart. For Alexander, it was as if fate had staged the moment. Here was a woman who understood suffering, who carried her own scars, yet still chose kindness over bitterness. Still, he could not reveal who he truly was. Not yet. Instead, he applied for work as a handyman at the same estate where Clara had just been hired as a maid. The mansion's staff believed he was nothing more than a desperate man in need of wages, and he allowed them to believe it. Every morning, he'd arrive with his toolbox, while Clara, in her plain uniform, swept the endless hallways. It was in those silent corridors and over late-night chores that their worlds began to intertwine. Clara would hum lullabies as she polished the grand piano, unaware that Ethan had wandered from his room, drawn to her voice. The boy, usually distant and cold with strangers, sat quietly at her feet, listening, as though a part of him recognized something he had long forgotten, and Alexander watched. He watched how his son leaned against Clara's side as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He watched how Clara, surprised but gentle, whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here." For the first time in years, Ethan smiled without hesitation. But what Clara did not know was that the man tightening bolts in the corner, pretending to be just another laborer, was the boy's father and one of the wealthiest men in Virginia. And What Alexander did not know was that Clara carried a secret of her own, one that would shake the very foundations of his carefully planned disguise. Little did Clara realize that her kindness was being tested by a man whose hidden truth would either heal both their wounds or destroy them forever. Clara Benson's life had never been easy. Born in the small town of Hawthorne, North Carolina, she had learned early that the world was not a place that handed kindness freely. Her father had died in a factory accident when she was only 7, and her mother struggled with illness until Clara was forced to drop out of school to support them. By the time she was 20, Clara had already experienced what most people spend a lifetime avoiding: grief, betrayal, and the sharp edge of poverty. But her deepest wound was the memory of her little boy, Noah, taken from her by a court that had favored money over love. Her ex-husband, a man with influence and family wealth, convinced the judge that Clara's low income and long work hours made her unfit to raise a child. Clara had pleaded, cried, and begged, but the law did not listen. The day she watched Noah's small hand slip from hers in the courthouse hallway, something inside her had shattered. Still, she endured. She worked wherever she could, cleaning motel rooms, serving at diners, scrubbing hospital floors at midnight. And though exhaustion clung to her like a second skin, she carried herself with dignity. Clara told herself that one day she would fight for Noah again. Until then, she would survive. At the Whitmore estate, her survival turned into silent servitude. The mansion was enormous. Marble floors that echoed with loneliness, chandeliers that seemed to mock her with their brilliance. Clara polished silver trays worth more than she had earned in an entire year. And yet, behind the luxury, she saw something unexpected: sadness lingering in the corners of those gilded halls. Ethan, the young heir, was the embodiment of that sadness. He was quiet, his eyes often lowered, as if afraid that speaking would expose him to more loss. The staff whispered that he barely spoke since his mother's death, that he locked himself in his room for hours and refused to eat unless forced. But when Clara entered, broom in hand or humming softly, Ethan seemed to thaw, if only a little. One evening, Clara found him in the library, sitting alone at a large oak table with books spread around him. She smiled gently. "Homework?" she asked softly. Ethan shook his head. "Just pretending," he whispered. She tilted her head. "Pretending what?" "That I have someone to read with," the boy replied, his voice almost breaking. Clara's chest tightened. She pulled out a chair, sat beside him, and began reading aloud from the book in front of him. It was a simple children's tale, one she used to read to Noah. Ethan leaned against her arm without asking, and for that hour, both of them pretended together. Alexander, standing silently in the hallway, witnessed it all. His heart twisted, partly in relief that his son had found comfort, partly in shame that he was hiding behind a lie. Every instinct told him to reveal who he was, to thank Clara for giving his boy something priceless. But he stayed in the shadows. His plan demanded patience, yet not everyone in the mansion looked kindly on Clara. Margaret, the head housekeeper, had ruled the staff for 20 years. She despised newcomers, especially those who threatened her control. Margaret noticed Ethan's growing attachment to Clara and sneered behind closed doors. "A maid is a maid," she told the others. "She doesn't belong in the child's life." The whispers turned cruel. Some staff mocked Clara's worn shoes, others questioned her past. Rumors spread that she had been abandoned by her own child, lies that cut deeper than they realized. Clara endured the gossip in silence, though inside her heart bled. One night, after hours of work, she returned to her small rented room in town. Rain leaked through the cracked ceiling, her mattress sagged with age, and her hands ached from scrubbing marble floors. She looked at the single photograph of Noah that she kept under her pillow. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, "One day, my love, One day I'll hold you again." Meanwhile, Alexander, still in his disguise, lay awake in his modest cabin on the edge of the estate. He thought of Clara's resilience, her quiet dignity, and the way Ethan's laughter had returned in her presence. For the first time in years, Alexander wondered if money had blinded him. Perhaps true worth wasn't measured in bank accounts or property, but in the strength of a heart that refused to break despite injustice. But danger was brewing. Margaret had decided to uncover Clara's secrets, determined to prove that the maid was unworthy of Ethan's trust. And Clara herself, unaware of Alexander's true identity, began to sense that the handyman who worked in the shadows was not what he seemed. As Ethan clung tighter to Clara's presence, both Alexander's disguise and Clara's hidden past were on the verge of colliding, a collision that would test every bond they had begun to form. The first sign that something was about to shift arrived not with thunder, but with velvet. Evelyn Whitmore Carradine, Alexander's aunt and chair of the Whitmore Foundation for Children. She stepped out of a Blacktown car at dawn as mist rolled off the Blue Ridge Hills. Pearls steady at her throat, eyes sharper than crystal. Evelyn was the sort of woman who could taste a lie in the air. She greeted the staff with a nod that felt like a verdict and walked the halls as if dust feared her. Clara noticed her only when the older woman paused at the library doorway. Ethan sat on the rug, building a small city from wooden blocks, the maid kneeling beside him with a dish towel tucked into her apron. "Careful with the bridge," Clara whispered. "It needs a stronger base." Ethan looked up. "Like yours?" Clara smiled, unsure how a child could see through ribs and worry to the steel she hid there. Evelyn lingered a beat longer, silent. Then she moved on. That afternoon, the estate buzzed. The annual Founders Gala loomed, polished silver, tuxedos, and a string quartet rehearsing Shenandoah. Donors would arrive from Richmond and D.C., the millionaire circles that measured generosity in checks and legacy plaques. Everyone knew Evelyn ran the night like a conductor, inviting local foster families and children supported by the foundation so wealthy guests could remember what their money was supposed to heal. From the pantry shadows, Margaret watched Clara tie fresh ribbons on programs. "Gala's no place for a housemaid to play nanny," she hissed to another maid. "The boy needs space from staff. Lines must be respected." Clara pretended not to hear. Respect, she'd learned, rarely included women who scrub floors. At dusk, Evelyn summoned the new handyman. Alexander arrived in his faded jacket, hat pulled low. She gestured to the terrace, eyes on the lawn where lanterns bobbed like fireflies. "You fix things," she said. "Can you fix a heart that has learned silence?" He swallowed. "Some breaks don't want riches, ma'am, just gentleness." Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. Tonight I want Ethan in the ballroom only if he wishes. But should he choose to stay, he'll need someone who understands. Quiet." She turned, pinning him with the faintest smile. "Have the maid watch him. The new one." Alexander's pulse stumbled. "Clara? Clara?" Evelyn repeated, already walking away. "Let's see the kind of bonds that never appear on a balance sheet. By 7, the chandeliers were constellations. Couples drifted in a perfume of lilies and old money, while a line of children, some in thrift store shoes polished to bravery, waited for their turn to meet donors. The quartet's bowstrokes made the room ache. Clara, in a neat uniform and simple bun, stood at the edge of the crowd, a small first aid kit tucked discreetly into her apron pocket out of habit. She didn't know why she'd been instructed to keep watch over Ethan, only that she would. Ethan hovered near the dessert table, eyes fixed on the chocolate fountain as if it were a riddle. A boy from the guest group bumped him. The stemware chimed. Ethan's breath hitched, panic winding through his chest the way it always did when rooms got crowded. Clara appeared at his side before the tremor became a quake. "Hey, champ," she murmured, kneeling so their eyes met. "See my... and count my fingers with me, slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good," she said, steady as an anchor. "Now smell the cinnamon. Someone brought snickerdoodles. Can you smell it?" He nodded, jaw unclenching. "Let's listen for the lowest note," she added, tilting her head toward the cello. "When you find it, we'll breathe with it." They breathed. The storm passed. Across the room, Evelyn's lips bent into something like approval. Margaret saw it too and stiffened, resentment curdling like old cream. The evening unfolded with small mercies. Ethan stuck close to the maid, choosing the edges of the ballroom over the glow at its center. When the foster kids sat for their group photo, a little girl in a thrifted pink dress froze at the flash. Clara slid beside her, murmuring, "We'll do it on 3. Ready?" The child nodded. The picture captured a moment that looked like redemption. Children with shoulders unhunched, a maid whose quiet competence held them like a net, and a shy boy leaning almost imperceptibly toward the warmth he missed. But catalysts rarely arrive alone. During the speeches, a man with slicked hair and a silk tie approached Evelyn. He whispered. She stiffened. Her eyes cut briefly toward Clara. The man was Gideon Hart, the Whitmore family attorney, mysterious in that careful way lawyers learn to be. He handed Evelyn a sealed envelope with a red string closure, the kind that meant history, not merely paper. Alexander saw it from the balcony where he pretended to adjust a sconce. The sight of Hart at his aunt's elbow made his stomach coil. Family secrets could be kept from towns and tabloids, but not from Evelyn. Not from Hart. After the applause, Evelyn drifted, past donors, past the strings, right to where Clara stood offering water to a boy who'd worn his courage thin. "You have a steadiness about you," Evelyn said, voice mild but testing. "Where did you learn that?" Clara hesitated. "From holding on. When life tries to take what you love." Evelyn's eyes flicked to the locket at Clara's throat, plain, oval, worn with thumbprints. "May I?" Clara touched the locket reflexively. "It's nothing fancy." "Fancy is noisy," Evelyn murmured. "I prefer things that endure." She didn't press it open. She didn't need to. The engraving on the outer rim, a barely there laurel pattern, sounded a bell in her mind. She'd seen it once on a custom piece auctioned at a Whitmore Foundation gala years ago, commissioned by Alexander's late wife. How would a maid carry a twin of that pattern? Before suspicion could fully bloom, the quartet paused, and a hush lifted like a veil. Ethan tugged Clara's sleeve. "Do you know you are my sunshine?" he asked, voice no bigger than a breath. Clara blinked. "I used to sing it every night. Would you just hum it?" He glanced at the room, embarrassed. She did, soft as a prayer. The low cello found her hum and followed. A few guests smiled without quite knowing why. Alexander closed his eyes against a sting he couldn't blame on champagne. That was when Margaret chose her moment. She swept in with a tray that didn't need carrying and a tone that didn't invite grace. "Mrs. Carradine," Margaret said. To Evelyn, loud enough for donors to overhear, "I'm sorry the maid has been overstepping. The staff hallway is that way." She cut a glare at Clara. "The boy shouldn't be clinging to help. It's unseemly." Clara's cheeks warmed. Ethan's hand found hers and held tight. Small fingers, fierce trust. Clara straightened, ready to apologize for a rule no one had explained. Evelyn didn't blink. "Margaret," she said, velvet over steel, "unseemly is forgetting why this house exists. Tonight the maid is precisely where she should be." A murmur rolled through the donors. Margaret retreated, face set to winter. Later, when lanterns had dimmed and the last guests drifted toward the gravel drive, Evelyn slipped through a side corridor and out to the rose garden, envelope in hand. The handyman waited by the fountain, where moonlight turned water to mercury. "I know who you are, Alexander," she said without preamble. "You've always believed the world could be adjusted with a wrench and a ledger. Tonight you saw something money can't manufacture." His shoulders dropped. "I needed to be sure, Aunt. Of the maid, of the mother my child deserves." Evelyn held up the envelope. "Then you should also be sure of this." She loosened the red string, produced a photocopy stamped with a county seal, and placed it in his palms. "Custody order, Halcombe, Vida Benson." Below that, a visitation schedule, a case number, and a notation about a guardian ad litem funded years ago by a corporate donor tied to the Whitmore Group. Alexander's pulse hammered. "What is this?" "Evidence that your empire has long fingers," Evelyn replied, gaze steady, "and that Clara Benson's greatest wound intersects with our name in ways you did not intend." She slid a second page free. "There's more. Her boy, Noah Halcombe, has been accepted to the Foundation's Autumn Arts Camp. He arrives Saturday, here, on this estate." Alexander's breath left him. In the ballroom glow, Clara was guiding Ethan up the grand stair, hand in hand, as if she had always known the map of his fear. The sight cracked something inside him that disguises could not protect. "If she sees Noah here," he whispered, "then a truth you tried to curate will arrive without asking permission," Evelyn said. "Decide quickly, Alexander. The line between betrayal and redemption is thinner than you think." By sunrise, the Millionaire's secret and the Maid'S lost child would be on a collision course at Whitmore Estate, forcing a choice that could bind an invisible family or shatter it beyond repair. The night after the gala, silence weighed heavy over the Whitmore Estate. The staff had retreated, the chandeliers dimmed, and only the occasional rustle of Virginia pines echoed beyond the mansion windows. Yet for Alexander Whitmore, still wrapped in his disguise as a poor handyman, there was no rest. The envelope Evelyn had handed him throbbed in his mind like an open wound. A custody order bearing the name of Clara Benson, the very woman who was melting Ethan's silence, proved that fate had twisted their paths long before they met. He read the lines again in his cabin by lamplight. Petitioner Gregory Halcombe, respondent Clara Benson. He remembered Halcombe vaguely, a regional contractor who had attended Whitmore fundraisers years ago, known for swagger and for leaning heavily on Whitmore business connections. Had the Whitmore empire inadvertently enabled Halcombe to strip Clara of her child? The thought made Alexander's jaw clench until it ached. His fortune, meant to provide opportunity, might have stolen from the woman who now offered his son a reason to smile again. Meanwhile, in her small rented room on the far side of town, Clara clutched the worn photograph of Noah against her chest. The gala had stirred memories too raw to silence. Ethan's small voice asking her to hum "You Are My Sunshine" had opened a chamber of her heart she had tried to lock away. She whispered Noah's name into the dark, promising herself that one day she would find a way back to him. The next morning, Ethan trailed Clara as she dusted the shelves in the conservatory. His laughter, fragile but unmistakable, danced through the air as she taught him how to whistle a tune. Margaret, passing by with a tray of cutlery, narrowed her eyes. Her resentment had grown into something poisonous. "Clara," she said sharply, "the boy has lessons. He doesn't need coddling from the help." Clara straightened, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm only keeping him company until his tutor arrives." "Company," Margaret hissed. "Don't think kindness earns you a place in this family. We've seen maids like you before, dreamers, hoping for more than their station. It always ends the same." Her words dripped with venom, but Clara refused to answer. Ethan's hand slipped into hers as if to say, "Don't listen." What Margaret did not know was that her bitterness was about to have company. The very next day, the Foundation's Autumn Arts Camp was set to open on the estate grounds, bringing children from across the state, including Noah Halcombe, Clara's own lost boy. On Saturday morning, the estate bloomed with color. School. Buses rumbled up the drive, releasing children with sketchpads, violins, and nervous smiles. Volunteers guided them through tents pitched across the lawns. Clara had been assigned to help serve refreshments, her heart swelling as she watched the children run across the grass. She did not know that one of them was hers. From the balcony, Alexander scanned the crowd with the sharp eyes of a father and a man about to face a moral storm. He spotted Noah instantly. Dark hair, earnest eyes, a backpack dangling from one shoulder. The resemblance to Clara was undeniable. His stomach twisted. Clara was about to collide with her past in the most unforgiving way. Ethan tugged at his sleeve. "Dad," he whispered, forgetting for a moment that Alexander was supposed to be the handyman. "Why does that boy look like he belongs to her?" Alexander hushed him quickly, heart pounding. His disguise was splintering, not only before Clara, but before his own son. Clara, arranging cups of lemonade, froze as her gaze locked on a boy chasing a paper airplane across the grass. Time slowed. The way he ran, the way he laughed, it was Noah, her Noah. Her knees weakened and she gripped the table for balance. Tears welled as she whispered, "It can't be. It can't." But then he turned, and she saw the tiny scar above his brow, the one he had gotten as a toddler when he fell off a tricycle. Her breath left her body. It is him. Noah's eyes met hers for a fleeting second. There was no recognition. Years and distance had erased the memory, but her heart thundered with certainty. Clara bit her lip, forcing herself not to call out his name in front of everyone, but Ethan noticed her trembling, her knuckles white against the table edge. "Miss Clara?" he asked softly. "Are you okay?" She crouched, hiding her tears. "Yes, sweetheart, I just remembered someone I love very much." Alexander watched the exchange from the terrace, his chest heavy. The moment had arrived sooner than he feared. If Clara discovered not only that her son was here, but also that Alexander had known about it, worse, that his empire may have been tangled in the very system that robbed her, her kindness would shatter into betrayal. Yet fate was relentless. That afternoon, a sudden summer storm broke over the estate, scattering children toward the tents. Clara rushed with the others, holding Ethan's hand. But as lightning cracked and thunder rolled, Noah stumbled near the pond, slipping on the wet grass. Clara's instincts overcame years of restraint. She sprinted through the rain, scooping him into her arms. "Noah!" she gasped before she could stop herself. The name ripped out of her like a wound reopening. Noah blinked at her in surprise, raindrops streaking his cheeks. "Do I know you, ma'am?" he asked softly. Clara froze, her heart tearing. She wanted to tell him everything, that she was his mother, that she had never stopped loving him, that every sleepless night had been filled with his memory. But the crowd was watching. Margaret's sharp eyes glittered from under an umbrella, and Alexander, still in disguise, stood paralyzed, knowing the fragile web of lies was collapsing. In one breath, Clara had spoken the name she had hidden for years. With Margaret eager to twist the moment into scandal, Noah caught between curiosity and confusion, and Alexander weighed down by secrets. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm about to tear through Whitmore Estate. Rain still threaded. From the tent flaps, when Clara realized the name she had spoken could not be called back. Noah steadied himself in her arms, surprised by the way this maid held him, firm, familiar, as if the space between them were years instead of inches. Around them, counselors ushered children to dry benches, and thunder rolled away toward the Blue Ridge like a door closing. "I'm okay," Noah said, swallowing. "Just slipped." Clara loosened her hold, palms trembling. Happens to the best of us. She forced a gentle smile. You're brave. The boy's eyes searched hers for something he couldn't name. Do you work here? I'm helping with the camp, she answered, voice thin with the effort not to break. If you need anything, water, a bandage, you ask for Clara, all right? He nodded, shy. A counselor called his group, and he jogged off, glancing back twice, as if checking a landmark he didn't want to forget. From the tent's edge, Ethan watched with hands jammed into his pockets. He had never seen Miss Clara look so pale. He stepped close, small and earnest. Do you need to count fingers? He whispered, repeating the exercise she used for him. Her laugh came out damp. Maybe I do. They counted together, quiet against the drum of rain. On 5, Ethan reached for her hand. Stay with me, he said, almost pleading. Please. Across the lawn, Alexander Whitmore gripped the tent pole, disguise feeling like a costume in the wrong play. He had prayed for goodness to find his child. He hadn't expected fate to wheel Noah, Clara's son, into the same scene like a test written in lightning. He needed to tell the truth. He needed to confess everything before rumor did it for him. But rumor had already found legs. Margaret, dry beneath a wide black umbrella, had fixed on the syllable Clara had slipped. Noah. She marched to the registration table and lifted a clipboard with proprietary relish. Noah Halcombe, she read, biting off each letter. Her gaze slid to the boy's counselor. Where is his guardian? With the bus group, the counselor replied. They'll return for pickup. Margaret's mouth thinned. I see. She set the clipboard down with the care of a fuse. Within minutes, she had swept up 2 groundsmen and Gideon Hart, the Whitmore attorney who had stayed to oversee donor liability. There's a situation, she said. The maid is attaching herself to a camper. One cannot be too careful. In the staff tent, Evelyn Whitmore Carradine dried raindrops from her pearls and took in the hum with a general's calm. She noticed Alexander hover outside the flap, jaw tight, eyes ablaze with a kind of fear that money never solved. Speak, she said. She saw him, Alexander answered. Her boy, he's here. Evelyn's nostrils flared, not in surprise but in recognition of the hour. Then whatever we are hiding will choose to be seen. She folded her umbrella. The only question is whether we greet it with shame or with honor. They found Clara under the awning near the pottery tent, kneeling with Ethan as he shaped a clay sun. She had the look of a woman bracing against both weather and memory. Gideon Hart approached first, clipboard tucked like a shield. Miss Benson, he said pleasantly. There's a small matter to clarify regarding camper interactions. Clara stood, smoothing her apron. Of course. Margaret slid in beside him. It's nothing personal, she said, making it unmistakably personal. Today is for children, not for staff to play out dramas. Ethan stiffened. She's not. Ethan, Clara whispered. It's all right. It is not all right, Evelyn said, voice low velvet. The group turned as she stepped beneath the awning. Today is for the kind of bonds that don't require invitations. Her eyes landed on Hart. Mr. Gideon, you will remember that. Staff are here to keep the children steady. Miss Benson has done exactly that. Certainly, Hart said, measured. However, a camper by the name of Noah Halcombe, Clara flinched at the name like a struck chord, appears to have a prior legal matter attached to his file. Hart finished smoothly, as if the flinch were a page turn. In everyone's best interest, I'd like to keep boundaries clear. Ethan let the clay sun collapse and took Clara's, and in both of his. I want her here, he said, voice rising for the first time, the child choosing his ground. I want the maid. Hart glanced to Evelyn. Evelyn glanced to Alexander. And Margaret, who had built her small kingdom on rules that protected none but her pride, decided the moment belonged to her. She stepped forward, chin high. "And what would Mr. Whitmore want?" she asked archly, and the use of the name cracked, the air like fresh thunder. If he were here, that is, not hiding in his cabin or in plain sight. The world tilted. A groundsman's cap came off. 2 servers gasped. Clara turned slowly toward the man she knew as the handyman, the one who moved like he belonged to silence, who fixed things with careful hands and eyes that softened when Ethan smiled. Alexander's disguise sagged under her gaze, the way wet cloth surrenders to gravity. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, the 2 words a terrain of disbelief. The millionaire stood where the poor man had been. Alexander did not reach for his hat or for a lie. He stepped forward, rain damp at his shoulders, and let the truth show in his face. "I am Alexander Whitmore," he said, voice steady, no longer borrowing the cadence of the unseen. "I should have told you sooner. I wanted—" He faltered, because wanting sounded small next to consequence. "I needed to know who would love my son without loving his father's money. That is my betrayal." Clara's breath hitched, as if someone had pulled a thread through her ribs. Behind her eyes, scenes rearranged. The handyman's toolbox, the way staff deferred even to his silence. Evelyn's strange kindness. The envelope none of them mentioned aloud. "You watched me comfort your child, while you pretended to be poor," she said. "You let me speak like we were equals when you knew everything." The last word cut. "I knew nothing that mattered," Alexander answered quietly. "Not until I saw Ethan lean into you. Not until I saw a nanny's heart in a world that misnames value. And then," he swallowed, "then I learned my family's power might have touched the worst day of your life. I cannot undo that, but I can put it right." Gideon's heart cleared, his throat forcing order back into chaos. To clarify the record, the guardian ad litem assigned in Halcombe versus Benson was paid through a general grant the foundation provides to the county, a program standardized for years. No funds were earmarked for any specific litigant, nor did Mr. Whitmore direct. "Spare her the brochure," Evelyn snapped. "Intent does not erase harm." Clara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold beneath summer air. "Your money sat in the room where a judge decided my love was less than a ledger," she said. "Maybe it didn't speak, but it was." Listening, Ethan pressed against her side, startled by adult voices becoming sharp. "Miss Clara?" She smoothed his hair as if soothing herself. "I'm here, sweetheart." She looked up at Alexander. "But I cannot be here under a lie." The camp director hurried over, whispering about schedules and donor tours, trying to shepherd scandal off the grass. But truth had found its stage. Noah's group rounded the garden path, laughing, faces lit with the relief that follows rain. The boy spotted Ethan and waved. Ethan waved back, a tentative bridge between 2 small islands. Then Noah noticed Clara, saw the way her eyes shone and steadied as if she had practiced holding oceans. The sight drew others. A counselor, puzzled, asked, "Do you 2 know one another?" Clara forced a breath. "I'm staff, that's all." Margaret's smile was a thin knife. For now, Evelyn stepped between cruelty and its target. "Miss Benson, walk with me," she said, and led Clara toward the orangery, a glass house warm with citrus and damp earth. Alexander, Hart, and Ethan followed at a distance, Margaret in their wake like weather refusing to break. Inside, the air smelled of lemons and soil. Evelyn closed the door on the chatter outside and turned to Clara with a softness that surprised even herself. "Child," she said, though Clara was no child, "I do not ask for forgiveness of what we did not intend. I ask for a chance to repair what our name allowed." Clara held her ground. "Repair how? By writing a check? By deciding, for me again?" Evelyn's jaw set. By leveraging what we built to undo what others abused, by calling in favors where they were taken, by making sure Noah's best interest is argued by someone whose salary doesn't depend on pleasing donors. Gideon Hart lifted his hands, palms open. I can motion for a review of the custody arrangement, request updated evaluations, and petition for extended visitation, quietly if you prefer. Clara's eyes flicked to Alexander, the millionaire who had come to her as a poor man. Quiet is how I lost him, she said. Quiet rooms, quiet deals, quiet power. Before Evelyn could answer, a shadow crossed the orangery door. It opened without a knock. A man in a suit stood there, damp cuffs, hair combed hard. He didn't wait for permission to enter. Apologies, he said in a tone that held none. I was told my child is here. His gaze slid over the group and fixed on Clara with a recognition tilted toward disdain. Miss Benson. Her fingers went numb. Gregory Halcombe stepped farther in, planting ownership in the tiles with each heel. I received a message that Noah had some interaction with staff. I'd like to ensure boundaries are respected. His eyes flicked to Alexander, lingered a fraction too long on the face money had taught him to fear in court. Mr. Whitmore, he managed a tight nod. An honor. Evelyn's smile didn't reach her eyes. You say boundaries the way some men say walls. This is a camp, Mr. Halcombe. Children cross lawns here. Children cross lines when maids confuse roles, Margaret inserted, as if invited. Gregory barely hid his satisfaction. At the dog pile. As Noah's custodial parent, I must object to inappropriate attachments. Last time I checked, the court found Miss Benson unstable. Clara flinched as if the old judgment had fingerprints. The court found me poor, she answered softly. It called it a moral failing and wrote it down. Gregory moved to the door, holding it open like a threat. Then we're done. I'll take my son now, and I'll be speaking to council about foundation staff undermining a lawful order. He straightened. Unless Mr. Whitmore wishes to involve himself personally. The challenge glimmered oily and precise. Alexander stepped forward, at once the handyman who fetched tools and the patriarch who wrote checks. I will involve myself in whatever way protects the children on this property, he said, and for the first time the room heard the engine beneath his restraint. But we'll begin with civility. Civility doesn't change facts, Gregory said. Noah leaves today. Not without a conversation, Evelyn replied, not in a tone that treats human ties like trespass. Gregory's gaze hardened on Clara. You say one word to him, and I will have an injunction on your doorstep before dusk. He turned to go, then paused, savoring the last cut. And Miss Benson, don't forget the court kept your secrets on file. Best not to stir family secrets you can't afford. He stepped out, letting the door whisper shut behind him. Clara stood very still. Somewhere beyond the glass, laughter rose and fell like a tide. Within her, plates shifted, the need to protect Ethan, the longing that answered when Noah looked back, the fury at a world where millionaire voices were microphones and maid voices were whispers. When she finally spoke, the words came low and clear. If he takes Noah now, she said, I may never see my son again. She lifted her chin toward Alexander, and if you do nothing, then your apology is only a prettier wall. Alexander's answer was immediate. I won't let him disappear you. Evelyn nodded once, already reaching for her phone. Then we move, she said. Hart, file what you must. Alexander, prepare for the public version of the truth you made private. Margaret opened her mouth to object, but Ethan, who had been quiet as a held breath, took Clara's hand and spoke for the room. Don't let him take her away, he said, meaning more than he understood. Outside, buses were warming their engines. Gregory Halcombe was striding toward the field to collect Noah. Inside the glass house, The millionaire, the maid, and a child who needed both stood on the thin line between betrayal and the first steps of redemption. And someone was about to cross it. Engines rumbled on the gravel drive as buses prepared for departure, and the estate seemed to hold its breath. Gregory Halcombe, shoulders stiff and jaw tight, cut across the wet grass with the certainty of a man who believed the law was an iron shield. He had every intention of reclaiming his son, as if the camp, the mansion, and the people inside it were mere interruptions to his authority. From the orangery windows, Clara pressed trembling palms against the glass, watching the inevitable unfold. She whispered Noah's name, though no sound reached the air. Ethan, clutching her skirt, felt her body shake and whispered back, "Don't cry, Miss Clara. We'll think of something." His small attempt at courage pierced her deeper than any insult Margaret had ever thrown. Alexander Whitmore, at last stripped of disguise, knew there was no more time for shadows. He stepped into the rain, crossing the lawn toward Gregory, each stride shedding the poor man's pretense and reclaiming the weight of the millionaire he was. Whispers rippled through staff and campers alike, some recognizing him, others stunned that the quiet handyman had transformed into the estate's master. Gregory stopped at the edge of the field, eyes narrowing. "So it's true," he muttered, voice pitched for Alexander's ears alone. "The Whitmore heir himself playing dress-up with servants. What game is this?" "No game," Alexander said steadily, though the rain clung to his brow like sweat. "Only a search for truth," Gregory scoffed. "Truth? The truth is simple. Noah is my son. The courts confirmed it. I'm here to take him home." He gestured sharply toward the councillors herding campers to the buses. But Evelyn Whitmore Carradine's voice carried across the courtyard, clear and resonant. "Not so fast, Mr. Halcombe." The older woman descended the steps with an umbrella balanced like a scepter, Gideon Hart trailing with folders clutched to his chest. "Custody orders are not stone tablets, and the Foundation has grounds to petition for review. Noah's welfare is our concern, too." Gregory's jaw worked. "You'll drown yourself in paperwork before you take him from me. Money doesn't rewrite rulings." "Neither does arrogance," Evelyn retorted. She planted herself between Gregory and the buses. "You speak of law, but you forget justice. They are not always the same." Noah, standing with his group, spotted the standoff. His brow furrowed as he saw Clara emerge from the orangery, her apron damp from tears and rain alike. She didn't move closer. Fear chained her feet, but her eyes locked on him, pleading without words. "Dad," Ethan whispered to Alexander, tugging his sleeve. "Do something. Don't let him take her son like I lost my mom." The plea cleaved Alexander's heart. He stepped closer to Gregory, lowering his voice so only the rival could hear. "You've won in court, but have you looked into that boy's eyes? He doesn't need victory speeches. He needs love. Can you give it without cruelty?" Gregory sneered. "And what, you think a maid can? She couldn't even keep him." Clara gasped at the venom, but Alexander didn't flinch. "You're right, poverty cost her the battle. But don't mistake the gavel's sound for truth. I've seen her heal wounds. Money never could." He let his gaze drift to Ethan, who stood straighter, a child leaning into courage. "And my son has chosen her heart over any fortune. That is worth more than rulings." The buses honked impatiently. Councillors called names. Noah's group lined up, but he twisted in place, searching Clara's face again. "Why does she look at me that way?" he asked softly to his counsellor, confusion threading his voice. Margaret seized the moment, striding forward with false righteousness. "Because she oversteps, because she can't respect boundaries." She raised her chin. "She's unstable, just as the court declared. Mr. Halcombe is right to protect the boy." Clara's voice, small but fierce, broke through the rain. "I am not unstable, I am a mother. The court took him because I had no money, not because I had no love." Her words cracked open the silence like thunder itself. "And you..." She turned to Gregory, eyes blazing. "You may have won him on paper, but you have never known what it means to fight for him with your soul." Gasps stirred through the gathered donors and staff. Noah froze, staring at her, recognition flickering in the way a child senses truth, even without memory. "Mom," he whispered uncertainly, the single word trembling into the air before anyone could stop it. The world tilted. Gregory lunged forward. "Noah!" But Ethan moved first, standing in front of Clara as if his small frame could shield her from every storm. "Don't yell at her!" he cried. "She's the only one who makes people feel safe." Gregory's face flushed crimson. "You dare!" Alexander stepped between them, finally unleashing the full weight of his authority. "Enough! You will not raise your voice at a child, nor at the woman who gave you the son you claim to love." His voice carried across the estate, echoing against stone and glass. "This ends with dignity, or it ends with me in court beside her. And unlike before, the Whitmore name will not stand silent." For a moment, even the rain seemed to hesitate. Noah clutched his counselor's hand, torn between worlds, but his eyes never left Clara. "Why do I feel like I know you?" he whispered again, louder this time. Clara's tears broke free, and she bent to meet his gaze, though distance still separated them. "Because a mother's heart never lets go," she said, voice quivering. Gregory spun to the counselor. "Get him on the bus." But Evelyn's cane struck the stone, a sharp command. "No, the boy deserves to speak. The law will have its turn, but tonight, justice will breathe." The counselor hesitated, torn between authority and conscience. Rain drummed louder, staff murmured, Margaret's satisfaction soured into unease, and in that suspended moment, the collision everyone feared had finally arrived. The millionaire's secret, the maid's wound and the child at the center were all exposed beneath the storm's relentless gaze. As Noah's whisper of "Mom" lingered in the air, the estate braced for the consequences. Would the truth forge a path to redemption, or would betrayal tighten its grip, tearing 3 lives apart just as they began to entwine? The single word, "Mom," didn't stop the buses, but it stopped the air. Heads turned, umbrellas tilted. A gull of silence wheeled over the Whitmore lawns before sound returned in a scatter of orders and anxious whispers. "Load up!" a counselor called, voice cracking. Gregory Halcombe seized the opening, striding toward the lineup with the impatience of a man who believed custody was a door only his key could fit. "Noah," he said, clipped and bright, "we're leaving." Noah's hand tightened on his backpack strap. His eyes, still fixed on Clara, flickered to the bus, then back again, the inner compass of a child, tugged between map and memory. "Do we have to go now?" he asked, small. "We do," Gregory said. "Right now." Under the awning, Ethan leaned into Clara's leg. "Don't let him take her away," he murmured, transposing fear into the wrong pronoun, because that's how fear sounds in boys who have already lost too much. Clara smoothed his hair, but kept her gaze on Noah as if staring could stitch distance. "Be brave," she whispered, not to the boy across the grass, but to herself. Alexander Whitmore stepped forward without disguise, rain stitching his shoulders into the scene. "Mr. Halcombe," he called, voice calm enough to travel. "Let's move with care. The Foundation has counsel on site. There's no need to..." "To what?" Gregory pivoted, a smile that showed teeth, but not kindness. "To follow a court order? To protect my son from staff who can't respect roles?" He lifted his chin toward Clara, as if accusing a horizon. "The maid doesn't get to rewrite the past." Evelyn Whitmore Carradine arrived at Alexander's side, umbrella high, pearls like a metronome against the storm. "The past isn't a statue, Mr. Halcombe," she said. "It's a room. It can be rearranged when truth was left outside." Gregory's reply was swallowed by the grumble of a county SUV turning up the drive. Blue strobes licked the wet hedges. Deputy Sheriff Cole Anders stepped out, hat tucked under his arm, reins spotting his tan uniform. He took in the tableau, the buses, the millionaire, the maid, the attorney, the boy at the fulcrum, and his brows knit with the fatigue of men who keep order for a living and find that hearts don't file neatly. "Afternoon," Cole said. "Dispatch got a call about a disturbance. What's the nature?" "Foundation event," Gideon Hart answered smoothly, legal folders under his arm like a life raft. "There's a pre-existing custody order. We intend to petition for review. In the meantime, Gregory cut in, holding out a copy in a plastic sleeve. "The order stands. My son leaves with me. If someone here interferes, it becomes much simpler for a judge." Cole scanned the document, thumb grazing the seal. He looked at Clara then, at the washed-out courage in her face, at the way Ethan clung to her like a shoreline. "Ma'am," he asked gently, "is there a specific allegation you're making right now, or—" Clara swallowed. How to compress 5 years of ache into a sentence the law would recognize. "Only that I am his mother," she said softly, "and that I was poor when that mattered more than love." Cole's jaw moved, the tiniest pressure point of sympathy. But he was a deputy, and deputies stand on paper. "I'm not here to take sides," he said, which is what men say when the world demands they choose a side anyway. "But I can't enforce anything that contradicts this order without a judge." "Then get me one," Evelyn said, already tapping her phone. "Gideon?" "I'm filing an emergency motion now," Hart replied, thumbs flying. "We can request a temporary stay of removal based on new evidence and the boy's stated distress." Gregory laughed without mirth. "You'll be lucky if a clerk answers before Monday." Noah slid a step toward the bus, then 2 steps back, tethered by a thread no one could name. His counselor knelt. "Hey, buddy," she said gently. "We got aboard. Your dad's waiting." "Can she say goodbye?" Noah asked, pointing at Clara with that pure, dangerous simplicity only children dare. The counselor looked to Cole. Cole looked to Gregory. Gregory said, "No." It was an answer. Shaped like a closing gate, something in Clara snapped a little, not into violence, but into clarity. She stepped to the edge of the awning, rain stippling her cheeks, and began to hum. The tune was soft, afraid, then sure. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Her voice found the note and held it, the same way she had held a smaller boy. Long ago, in a thrift store apartment, while thunderstorms practiced the alphabet on the roof, Noah stopped moving. He turned slowly, a weather vane discovering wind. He didn't remember the words, but his body remembered being smaller in a room with yellow light and a woman's chest for a pillow and the smell of soap and cinnamon. Without deciding to, he walked toward the sound. "Enough!" Gregory snapped, lunging, but quiet Ethan, stepped between Noah and the outstretched hand, spine a thin steel. "No yelling," he said, voice shaking. "She's helping." Cole moved too, not fast, just there, a palm lifted in a human speed bump. "Sir, let's keep this calm." He turned to Clara. "Ma'am, keep your distance, please." He didn't say, "Don't hum." The law has no clause for humming. "I will," Clara said, and let the melody taper into one last note that landed like a promise. Across the lawn, a donor lifted a phone, the tiny, hungry eye of the modern world, and began to record. Another, joined, then another. Somewhere a story was already being written without context, without mercy. Family secrets enjoy the shadows. The internet does not. "Shut that down!" Margaret hissed to a server, as if the weather would obey her. She stalked toward Clara, voice pitched to slice. "You've made a spectacle of yourself, of this house. If you cared about the boy, you'd stop." "Enough," Alexander said, this time to Margaret. "Return to the main house," she bristled. "I won't be dismissed in front of staff." "You just were," Evelyn said, not unkindly. "Just, finally. You may collect your things after the event. Your employment is concluded." The sentence landed like a gavel. The head housekeeper stood very straight for 3 long seconds, then turned and walked toward the mansion, a queen without a country. Hart's phone chimed, a tone no one in that circle would forget. He glanced down, eyes widening as he read. "Judge Klein is on circuit this weekend," he announced. "He's reviewed the emergency filing. Temporary stay granted. 72 hours to evaluate the situation and consider a modification pending hearing." Gregory's head snapped. "On what basis?" "New information regarding the original appointment of the guardian ad litem," Hart replied, all silk back in his voice, "and the child's expressed emotional distress at removal today. The order stipulates Noah remains on the estate under foundation supervision until Tuesday at 5 p.m. Both parties will appear by video conference tomorrow morning." A tremor of relief went through Clara, so strong it left weakness behind. She caught the edge of the table. Ethan's small hand found hers and squeezed, a secret handshake invented under storms. "This is outrageous," Gregory said, color high. "You've bribed a judge. You confuse donation with direction," Evelyn replied coolly. "One requires a receipt, the other leaves fingerprints." Cole took the paper Hart held out, scanned, and nodded. "It's valid," he said, looking at Gregory with a patience he'd practiced on bar fights and custody disputes, and men who heard only their own voices. "Sir, I'll need you to stand down until the review." Gregory's smile cracked. "For 72 hours, he said. "Enjoy the illusion." He leaned, voice pitched for Clara alone. "But I will remind him. Every minute he spends with you will make leaving hurt more." Clara didn't look away. "Then you might learn what leaving feels like too." Her voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. The buses powered down. Counselors exhaled. In the small migrant camp of emotions that formed on the wet grass, people chose tense. Mercy, anger, hope. Noah approached the cluster under the awning, as if it were a dock and he a boat that had been traveling too long. He stopped in front of Clara, unsure where to place his hands. "Hi," he said, "because hello is a bridge you can always build." "Hi," she answered, and did not touch him. "Do you like art?" He nodded. "I draw spaceships." "We have paper," Ethan offered, the child who had learned sharing from scarcity, "and snickerdoodles." Noah smiled, small and sideways. For a moment the storm fell away, and 2 boys found a corner of normal. "Ground rules," Cole said quietly, too. "The group voice a gentle fence. For the next 3 days, the Foundation supervises. Miss Benson, you may participate in activities if the camp director approves. Mr. Halcombe, you may visit on schedule per the order. No contact becomes a weapon. Understood?" Gregory gave a curt nod. Evelyn inclined her head. Alexander thanked. The deputy with a look more than words. Too many words had already been loosed. As the crowd thinned, Hart and Evelyn conferred in undertones about affidavits and old case numbers. Cole radioed his status and left the lights off as he pulled away. The donors put their phones down and picked their masks back up. Clara finally allowed herself to sit on the edge of the refreshments table. Her hands shook so badly the lemonade jellied. Alexander brought her a towel she didn't need, and the apology she did. "I should have told you," he said. "From the first day, from the first hum, my disguise was a kind of betrayal I let myself believe was noble." She kept her eyes on Noah, who was laughing now at something Ethan had said about cookie crumbs and constellations. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said. "Honesty costs, but it pays interest. But I know what I won't do. I won't let the kind of power that took him once decide the terms now. If you want to help, stand where it hurts." "I will," he said, the millionaire sounding at last like a man. Evelyn joined them, gaze softer than her pearls suggested possible. "Tomorrow's hearing will require more than filings," she said. "It will require story, the truth of what was done and what could be mended. Can you tell it?" Clara nodded. I've been telling it to myself for 5 years. I can tell it to a judge, and we will tell ours, Evelyn added, exchanging a brief charged look with Hart. There is a family secret we have carried too long, a donation routed through a shell that should have been daylight. It did not buy a verdict, but it bought the room where the verdict felt inevitable. The record will hear that from us. Clara looked up, surprised by the admission. Why tell it now? Because secrecy protects the wrong people, Evelyn said, and because a boy just asked the sky for his mother with one word. Twilight folded itself around the estate with the suddenness of summer. Staff relit lanterns. The children returned to tents for cocoa and camp songs that would sound different after this day. Ethan asked Noah if he liked chess. Noah said he didn't know how. Ethan said, Miss Clara teaches everything, and Noah said, maybe she could teach me humming. And Clara laughed for the first time since the storm broke. In the quiet that followed, Alexander walked the perimeter of the rose garden, the way men walk their properties when they are deciding what their land is for. He stopped at the fountain where Evelyn had handed him the envelope and saw his face reflected back, a man who had thought he could manufacture fate and instead had been humbled by it. Behind him, footsteps. He turned to see Margaret, not gone. After all, hovering in the shadow of a hedge with a phone clenched white, her expression held a victory that didn't belong to any good kingdom. I thought you were collecting your things, he said. You'll want to see what I've collected, she answered, holding up a screen that showed a paused video, the moment Clara cried, Noah, in the rain, the boy turning, the deputies, arrival. Caption, Billionaire's maid claims camper as her son at charity event. The view counter ticked upward like a fever. The town will eat this, the state will eat this, and when Mr. Halcombe sues, he'll eat you. Alexander's mouth hardened. You shared this? Margaret's smile sharpened. I don't have a position to lose anymore, but others do. He stepped closer, not threatening, simply present in the way mountains are present. Leave my property, he said. Now, if you choose war online, know that the only soldier you'll wound is a child. She hesitated, just long enough to show that power had been her faith, not duty, then turned and vanished into the deepening blue. When he returned to the orangery, Clara was alone, head bowed over the locket Evelyn had noticed days before. She clicked it open. Inside, opposite a tiny photo of baby Noah, a second oval of metal lay hidden, a micro-etched serial number almost, worn smooth, the signature of a custom jeweler in Charlottesville who had once engraved pieces for Eleanor Whitmore, Alexander's late wife. Clara traced the number, frowning. I bought the locket from a church sale, she murmured half to herself. Used. I never knew whose pattern this was. Alexander stared, something like dawn breaking behind his eyes. My wife designed pieces for foundation auctions, he said slowly. If that serial is hers, then the locket that held your son's picture once sat in a room my family filled. He exhaled. We've crossed paths longer than we knew. Clara closed the locket. Steady now. Then tomorrow, we bring all of it, she said. The lullabies, the ledgers, the truths that don't fit on paper. Outside, the campfire crackled. Someone began, You are my sunshine, off-key but brave, and other voices joined until the tune became bigger than one memory. Ethan and Noah sat side by side on a log, knees bumping. They didn't sing, they listened. Morning would bring the judge's gaze, the internet's bite, and a locket number that linked a millionaire's legacy to a maid's grief. Between betrayal and redemption, the next move would decide which story the world believed and which truth the child would carry. Sunday morning arrived cloaked in mist, the kind that softens edges and makes the world feel like it's holding its breath. The estate, usually bustling with gardeners and staff, was hushed as though even the walls knew the day's weight. Inside the grand library, books rose like witnesses around a long mahogany table where laptops and camera tripods had been hastily arranged. By noon, the video conference hearing would begin, and every secret balanced on its edge. Clara sat near the window, her apron replaced by a simple dress Evelyn had insisted she borrow. Her hands twisted in her lap, knuckles pale, but her gaze was steady. Across the room, Noah played a quiet game of chess with Ethan, their voices soft, their laughter rare but real. For a moment, Clara let herself memorize the sight. Her son sitting with another boy, not as rivals, but as brothers born of circumstance. Alexander Whitmore paced near the fireplace, the fire unlit, though the morning was cold. He had traded his handyman's disguise for a tailored suit, but he wore it with the unease of a man who had outgrown armor. The weight of his deception still pressed, but today was not about him. Today was about choosing whether to remain silent or to bleed truth into the record. Evelyn stood at the head of the table, pearls gleaming against black silk, posture regal. "Remember," she said, addressing them all, "this is not about theatrics. The judge will want clarity. The internet is already ablaze with last night's footage. Margaret's gift to the world. It shows Clara crying Noah's name and the boy whispering, 'Mom.' Half the comments call it staged, half call it destiny. We must anchor it in fact." Gideon Hart, sleeves rolled, adjusted the microphone. "Judge Klein is known for piercing through performance. He'll ask about timelines, finances, and Noah's best interests. We'll submit the Lockett serial as evidence connecting Clara's photo to Whitmore Foundation auctions. It demonstrates that her grief isn't a fabrication, but a thread woven through this family's history." Clara lifted the locket from her neck, setting it carefully on the table. Her voice trembled, but only once. "This is all I had when I lost him. If the judge doesn't believe me, then at least the truth will be spoken aloud." Alexander stepped forward. "Clara, whatever the court decides, you will not stand alone again, not in silence, not against money." His eyes softened. "Not while I have breath." Before more could be said, the laptop chimed. The screen flickered and Judge Harold Klein appeared, a man in his late 60s with wire glasses and a demeanor that mixed sternness with weariness. He adjusted his robes and scanned the faces on screen. "This emergency hearing is now in session," he intoned. "Case number Halcombe versus Benson. Modification review. I see Mr. Halcombe, Counsel Hart, Ms. Benson, and representatives of the Whitmore Foundation. Proceed." Gregory's image filled one square of the screen, his suit immaculate, his smile thin. "Your Honor, this is a stunt. Yesterday, a maid employed as staff publicly disrupted a foundation event by claiming my son as hers. It was a spectacle, captured on video and circulated without context. She lost custody 5 years ago. Nothing has changed." Clara leaned closer to her microphone. "With respect, Your Honor, everything has changed. My circumstances, my ability to provide my support system, and what has not changed, what never will, is that Noah is my son. I did not lose him because of neglect or harm. I lost him because poverty is punished in ways wealth never is." The judge's eyes flicked toward her, then toward Hart. "Counsel, do you have evidence beyond sentiment?" "Yes, Your Honor," Hart replied smoothly. He presented scanned documents on the screen. The original custody order, the guardian ad litem's funding source, and the new evidence from the locket. This locket belonged to Ms. Benson and contained Noah's photo. Its serial number links directly to a Whitmore Foundation auction, connecting the respondent's personal history with Foundation oversight. Further, the Foundation acknowledges that its funding inadvertently supported the appointment that may have prejudiced her case. The judge's brow furrowed. "Mr. Whitmore, is that true?" Alexander inhaled. His reputation, his empire, his name, all balanced on the answer. "Yes, Your Honor. The Foundation's donations were never meant to influence custody rulings, but they created conditions where wealth whispered louder than love. That is a truth we failed to confront. Today, I stand with Ms. Benson to rectify it. Gregory leaned in, voice sharp. Of course he does. He's a millionaire playing savior to a maid. This is theater. Noah doesn't even remember her. At that moment, Noah's voice, small but clear, carried from behind Clara. I do. The boy had slipped closer to the microphone, Ethan hovering protectively at his side. I don't remember everything, but when she sang yesterday, I felt safe, like when I was little. The judge paused, adjusting his glasses. Mr. Halcombe, the child's expressed recognition cannot be ignored. Coupled with the new financial disclosures, I find cause to grant expanded visitation to Ms. Benson, supervised under Foundation oversight until full review. Clara gasped, covering her mouth. Tears spilled, not of defeat this time, but of fragile victory. Thank you, Your Honor, she whispered. Gregory slammed his desk on screen. This is outrageous, the judge's voice cut sharp. What's outrageous, sir, is confusing possession with parenting. This hearing is adjourned. A full review will be scheduled within 60 days. Until then, Noah remains at Whitmore Estate, under shared oversight. He struck his gavel. The screen went dark. Silence filled the library before collapsing into relief. Ethan hugged Clara fiercely. Noah stood uncertainly until Clara knelt, tears shining, and whispered, "Hi, my love." This time, when Noah whispered, "Mom," it wasn't confusion, it was choice. But in the corner, Hart's phone buzzed with a new alert. He glanced at it, frowning. The footage has gone viral, millions of views already. Headlines read, "Millionaires, maid fights for son, family secrets exposed." The world is watching, and they won't wait 60 days for a verdict. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. Then let them watch. For once, the truth is on our side. Clara had won a fragile foothold, but with the internet ablaze, Gregory enraged, and old Whitmore secrets threatening to surface. The next battle would not be fought only in courtrooms. It would be fought in the eyes of the world. By Sunday evening, the storm had moved from the sky to the screens. The video, "Billionaires' Maid Fights for Son," splashed across local news, then regional, then national digests that chewed heartache into headline bites. Comment sections turned into juries with no oath to truth. Some viewers typed that a maid had more courage than courts. Others called it manipulation, a millionaire's redemption arc crafted by a PR team. The story didn't stay on the Whitmore lawns. It moved through living rooms and subway cars, into barbershops, church foyers, and kitchen tables where mothers lifted their eyes from dishes and said, "I know that ache." Inside the mansion, Evelyn drew the curtains and turned the crisis into choreography. She stationed a receptionist at the front line to route calls from reporters. She arranged rooms so Noah and Ethan could exist in a bubble of board games and cocoa. She ordered staff, what staff remained, to treat Clara not as scandal, but as center. Alexander, sleeves rolled, sat with Gideon Hart over a spread of documents. Ledgers, the Guardian ad litem program history, and a list of shell entities the Foundation had once used to anonymize giving. A line item pulsed like a heartbeat. Whitfield Civic Trust, established the year before Clara lost custody. It was meant to shield recipients from the politics of our name, Hart said, voice low. But it also shielded accountability. Evelyn didn't look away. Then we say it out loud. We do not let family secrets become Gregory's megaphone. Clara moved like someone relearning her body after a long illness. Alert to Noah, attentive to Ethan, careful not to drift into rooms where cameras might find a window. The boys built a sprawling Lego city on the library rug, negotiating traffic, patterns with the gravity of urban planners. Twice Noah glanced up to watch Clara fold blankets. Twice he opened his mouth and closed it again, a boy at the edge of a word he couldn't yet bear. Near dusk, The gates filled with cars. Not donors, reporters. Satellite vans sprouted like awkward flowers. A cluster of microphones bloomed at the road. At 7, the first live shot began. Margaret, coiffed and righteous, appeared on Channel 8, pearl brooch catching the floodlights. "I served that house 20 years, she told the camera, and I watched boundaries crumble the moment a maid decided her feelings mattered more than rules. The Whitmores pretend at redemption, but what you saw was stagecraft." Evelyn muted the television. "We will not answer her. We will answer facts." But the facts were now a tide, and tides drag. A blogger posted a leaked image of the Whitfield. Civic Trust officers circled one name, Eleanor Whitmore, Alexander's late wife. A podcaster spun it into narrative, the millionaire widow's ghost-funding custody outcomes. Twitter threaded conspiracies like beads. Somewhere in a newsroom, a producer said the word bribery on air, then corrected it to influence, but the damage hung there, sticky as rumor. "Let them talk," Alexander said, though his jaw ached from restraint. "Tomorrow we put sunlight on ledgers. Tonight we put quiet around children." Quiet frayed when Gregory posted his own video, polished, coached, his tie the exact blue of trust. "My son was exploited at a charity event," he said. A staff member, terminated previously, inserted herself where she had no right. The Whitmores are using their platform to rewrite a court order because they don't like how it looks. This is not about a mother's love. It's about power, doing what power does. Clara watched it once. Then she closed the laptop and went to the library, where Noah and Ethan had turned the Lego city into a spaceship port. "Can you teach me the song properly?" Noah asked, voice thin with hope and caution. "I only know the beginning." She sank beside him, the rug biting her knees like proof of being alive. "We'll go slow," she said. "We'll go together." In the study, Hart's phone pinged. He scanned the alert and swore under his breath. Halcom's attorney filed for a temporary restraining order to bar Clara from contact pending the 60-day review. He's using the public frenzy to argue emotional harm from exposure. Alexander leaned in. "Can he get an emergency ruling tonight?" "Unlikely," Hart said, already typing, "but he's working the optics." The optics worked. At 9, another live shot cut to a county official. "We're reviewing the foundation's role in court-appointed council funding," she said, hands steepled. "Transparency matters." It was the kind of sentence that sounds neutral and lands like an accusation. Evelyn straightened, eyes on the ledger stack. "Enough reaction," she said. "We go proactive. We publish our own audit by morning. Every donation, every program, every wall we thought was mercy and turned out to be a mirror." She looked to Alexander. "And you answer one question. On record, why did a millionaire pretend to be a poor man?" He didn't blink. "Because I was afraid the truth of my name would make strangers pretend to love my child. And because I didn't know how to stand beside need unless I disguised myself as it." "Then say that," Evelyn replied. "Let the world hear the part that asks forgiveness, not applause." Midnight neared. The boys slept at last. Noah on the sofa with a checkered blanket, Ethan on a beanbag, both within arm's reach of Clara, who dozed upright in a chair, locket warm against her skin like a hand. Alexander watched the three of them the way a man watches a shoreline after almost drowning. The phone on the credenza buzzed. Deputy Cole Anders. Alexander answered. "Sorry for the hour," Cole said. "I've been monitoring chatter. There's a rumor Margaret intends to hand over additional footage to a statewide outlet, edited to make it look like Miss Benson grabbed the boy and refused lawful instruction." "She didn't," Alexander said. "I know," Cole replied. "But video cut's better than memory. I'm dropping by in the morning to take formal statements from staff who were present. It'll matter." After the call, Alexander found Evelyn in the breakfast room, circle of lamplight making her pearls glow like moons. She had the Whitfield Civic Trust binder open and a late cup of Earl Grey cooling beside it. "Tell me it wasn't Eleanor's." "Idea," he said, bracing for an answer he couldn't bear. Evelyn's fingers rested on a page that bore his late wife's handwriting. "It was Eleanor's heart," she said softly. "She wanted children to have advocates who weren't silenced by cost. She didn't see how the structure, anonymous, efficient, could become an instrument for those who favor the loudest pocket." She looked up, eyes damp and fierce. "Grief made me guard that legacy like a shrine. It kept me from seeing who we were helping and who we were hiding." Alexander exhaled, a sound like cloth tearing. "Then tomorrow we say her name in truth, not myth. We say what we got wrong." The morning's first rumor arrived early. A leak. A reporter emailed Hart a scanned memo from 5 years ago, an internal foundation note recommending increased grants to the county family court due to promising outcomes. The phrase landed like a stone in a glass room. Promising to whom? Evelyn didn't flinch. "Publish the full memo trail," she ordered, "with context, with apologies, with a timeline of every grant awarded to both sides of the bar. Defense, prosecution, guardians, clinics. We will not cherry-pick our own penance." Hart nodded grimly. "I'll push it to the site before sunrise." In the nursery quiet library, Noah stirred. "Mom," he murmured, eyelids heavy. "I'm here," Clara answered, and those two words rethreaded something the court had unraveled. She hummed until his breathing deepened, then looked across the room to find Ethan watching her, awake. "Will he stay?" Ethan asked, the simple dread of a child who understands departures too well. Clara crossed to him and brushed hair from his brow. "For a while," she said honestly, "and then a judge will help decide the rest." "And you?" "I will stay as long as I'm allowed, longer if courage lets me." Before dawn, the estate security alerted a trespasser at the northern gate. Gregory had come early, alone, headlight beams cutting the mist. He wasn't there to fight, he was there to film. He turned his phone on himself, frame angled to catch the stone pillars and the Whitmore crest behind him. "My son," he began, voice smooth, "has been held by influence masquerading as compassion." The gate speaker crackled. Evelyn's voice cut through, cool as winter water. "You have access at 9 per the order. Until then you may rehearse your lines in your car." A pause. "Or you may ask yourself why a boy walked toward a nanny's song and not your command." Gregory smiled that TV smile. "See you at 9, he said, and killed the live. By 7, the foundation site published the audit. Receipts, letters, names, dates. The bones of truth laid out without makeup. The response split like everything else. Some called it integrity, others a confession dressed in pearls. A national morning show requested Clara on air. Hart declined. Not yet. The court first. At 8:30, Deputy Cole returned, took statements, and promised to pull the full venue surveillance to counter Margaret's edited clips. In the foyer, he paused by the Lego City and smiled. "My kid builds the same crooked towers," he said. "They're perfect because they're his." 9 o'clock brought Gregory, punctual as fury. He entered the library with his attorney, gaze sweeping for cameras, then for Noah. The boy sat beside Ethan, hands in his lap, chin lifted the smallest degree. Clara stood, spine tall, not touching, not hiding. Alexander and Evelyn flanked the room like bookends, old enough to remember when honor didn't need press releases. "We'll keep this brief," Gregory's lawyer said. "Supervised contact per the order. No coaching, no manipulation, no songs." "You can't outlaw music," Ethan blurted before anyone could shush him. Clara touched his shoulder and he settled. Gregory crouched to Noah's eye level, a pose that cameras love. "Ready to come home after this?" Noah didn't answer. He turned to Clara. "Can you tell me one thing?" She nodded, barely breathing. "Why did you let them take me?" The question cracked the room, not accusatory, just the kind of honest that grown men spend fortunes to avoid. Clara's eyes filled. "I didn't let it," she said. "I lost a fight I couldn't afford. I shouted in rooms that didn't hear me. But I never stopped looking for ways back to you. I learned how to stand, how to speak, how to wait without dying inside." She swallowed. "And I am here now." Gregory stood, bristling. "This is exactly the manipulation I—" Cole raised a palm. "Sir!" Art's phone buzzed again, more urgent than before. He read, blinked, then looked to Evelyn and Alexander. "New leak," he said, voice low. "Not from us. From the Charlottesville jeweler. He kept archival logs. The locket serial wasn't just Eleanor's design. It was custom ordered for a hospital maternity ward donation the week Noah was born. The receipt lists 2 names on the card." He turned the screen so they could see. One was Eleanor Whitmore, the other was Gregory Halcombe. The library seemed to lean toward the silence that followed. Clara gripped the back of a chair. Ethan's. Hand found Noah's. Alexander closed his eyes, the line between betrayal and redemption thinning to a thread you could see through. "How? Why?" Clara began, breathless. Art scrolled. "There's a note, in honor of the child who arrives today. May he know only light. The jeweler says a woman asked for the laurel pattern Eleanor favored. The man paid in cash." He lifted his gaze to Gregory. "Care. To explain how your name shares a receipt with Alexander's late wife on the day this boy was born." Gregory's composure faltered, a hairline crack across polished stone. With a single receipt, the past yawned open. A locket linking a millionaire's grace to a maid's grief, and a father's signature in a place he swore he'd never been. As the world watched, the next words spoken would decide whose truth survived, and which heart finally found redemption. The receipt lay on the table like a detonator. Names printed in ink, impossible to erase. Eleanor Whitmore and Gregory Halcombe. A locket ordered for a maternity ward the week Noah was born. The room tightened, air electric with a secret breaking free. Clara gripped the back of her chair, her knuckles white. "You said I was unfit. You painted me as unstable, but all along, you knew." Gregory's mask cracked, anger surfacing where charm usually lived. "I knew nothing of that receipt. Eleanor must have—" He faltered, words slipping like stones on wet ground. "She wanted to help. She was a patron. Don't twist it." Evelyn's voice cut like glass wrapped in velvet. "My sister-in-law did not sign her name blindly. If Eleanor added yours, it was because you were present, because you asked, because that locket was meant for Clara's hands, not to be hidden." In a church sale 5 years later, Noah looked from face to face, confusion heavy in his young voice. "Why is my name on something they're fighting about?" Clara crouched, eye level with her son. Her tears were steady now, not frantic, but fierce. "Because from the moment you were born, you were loved. By me, by others. And because some people use power to decide they knew better than a mother's heart. That's what we're fighting to fix." Gregory slammed his palm against the table. "Enough of this theater. The boy is mine by court order, and when this spectacle is over, he comes home with me." Alexander stepped forward, finally letting go of restraint. His voice filled the library like thunder that had found words. "Your name on that receipt is not just a coincidence. It is proof that you were entangled in dealings hidden from the court. And whether through pride or deceit, you let Clara drown while you claimed victory. That is not fatherhood, it is theft." Gregory turned red, his composure unraveling. "And what are you, Whitmore? A millionaire who dresses like a pauper to trick women into sainthood?" "I am a man who sees the truth now," Alexander answered, steady. "And I will use my name, my wealth, my reputation, not to take, but to repair." He placed a hand on Clara's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity, not possession. She will not stand alone again. The weight of the words silenced even Gregory's. Fury! Noah slipped his hand into Clara's, as if choosing in front of everyone. Ethan, watching, mirrored the motion. Two boys united by instinct, one mother's hand bridging them both. Hart cleared his throat, breaking the moment. Your Honor will see the jeweler's affidavit within the hour, he said into the laptop, where the judge still waited silently, absorbing every detail. We request immediate suspension of Mr. Halcombe's custody rights pending investigation into concealed financial involvement at the time of the ruling. Judge Klein adjusted his glasses, his voice low but certain. The evidence presented, combined with the child's expressed recognition, the foundation's disclosures, and the witness accounts, meets threshold for review. Effective immediately, custody of Noah Halcombe is placed in temporary joint guardianship between his mother, Clara Benson, and the Whitmore Foundation as supervisory partner. Mr. Halcombe is ordered to refrain from unilateral removal until further hearing. He raised the gavel. This court will see you in 30 days. Until then, let the child rest. The strike of wood echoed through the library. Clara bowed her head, relief breaking through her body like sunlight after a hurricane. Noah wrapped both arms around her, this time without hesitation. Mom, he whispered, not as a question but as truth. Gregory stumbled back from the table, color drained. For once, he had no words. He turned and left, his footsteps loud and lonely against the marble. Reporters outside caught only the echo of a window being thrown open. Evelyn stood at the sill, voice strong. For too long, our house hid mistakes in shadows. No longer. The truth belongs to the light, and the light belongs to the children. Cameras flashed, but she didn't flinch. Inside, Alexander knelt beside the two boys. Ethan, he said softly, you've gained a brother. The boy looked at Noah, then at Clara, then back at his father. Does that mean she's family? Too, Alexander smiled, a weary, grateful smile. It means she always was. Clara lifted her locket, the tiny photo of baby Noah now joined by living proof in her arms. Her voice shook, but not from fear. I thought I'd lost everything, but love, real love, finds its way home. I'm John Parker, and remember, every story hides a truth. Today, it was the truth of a maid's redemption, a millionaire's transformation, and a child's unbroken bond. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe, give your like, and tell us in the comments where in the world you are listening from, because every voice matters and every heart deserves to be seen.